Alright. Unfortunately, the mill isn't finished. I know there's been several videos of this thing. Soon to come, I've got addition of a couple things. Needed a hard reset button. There's a few other functions that I'm going to put along here. Even though I got a touch screen, that I wanted to see. I guess it's short of having like your F1 and F2 and F3 on screen type deal. So that's kind of where I'm getting that from. Of course, this here. I've had to change a couple things. I've realized that the pulleys that I had on there were not going to suffice what I'm looking for. So what had happened here is going a different route. What this was kind of a weird deal. It was you guys with your round columns, you know what I'm talking about, but this is the big nut that was on it. It's left-handed threads. How that pulley system, where's that? Oh, it's back here. This big pulley had the adapter on it. Of course, I may be completely off base here. I mean, it's a learning experience every day, but this pulley system was up here and it was like a hat, and then of course you had anchored to this round column, you had an idler pulley, and then of course you had your AC motor back there. Well, after all said and done, it was a 12-speed. Maximum speed was roughly, I think it was 3,000. But it was an AC motor, and I just got tired of the belt changes. So the norm was to go to the treadmill motor, which I have here. What's nice, I've noticed these are small bodied. I've had this for a while, but what's going to end up happening is there's a big pocket down in here, right there. That treadmill motor will basically, a majority of it will go down inside of there, and then I'll have a bracket system. It'll basically be a sleeve that holds that, and then this will slide back and forth to get belt tension. I don't foresee having a ton of belt tension, but what I've been figuring out on the belt pulleys is, of course, I have my little app on my phone. I've just been doing a little brainstorming. What I ended up doing was I cut this center part out of this pulley, but because it just seemed like this was kind of limiting me to get the RPM parameter that I want out of this spindle. I'll deal with the bearings if I have to later on, but what I ended up doing was this part here was off of this was off the motor. I cut the rest of the pulleys off. It's a cast aluminum. And then I cut that adapter off because it's kind of weird. I figured this was kind of the key. I didn't want to have to try to replicate all this, but this is a taper. This is a big, I don't know if you can see, like right there, yeah. That is a huge taper up into there, and then there's a nut. So that taper seems to pull, it holds fairly good, but I opted to I pulled that centerpiece out, machined it down to a given size, and then I cupped this pulley to where it basically slips on there, and then of course I got my set screws, and then up there on top of that pulley I left that shaft 5/8, so that way I have the one given pulley, and then later on if I think I need to change any kind of pulley I can just, you know, get a 5/8 shaft pulley and then change. And then I want to make it to where, you know, to locate that belt, then I'll make this sleeve in this bracket system to where all I have to do is slide that motor up or down. Now that's kind of nice in a couple different situations. One, I'll free up all of this back here. I'll be able to slide my mill back a little bit, but it just kind of keeps everything compact, and then I can locate the motor solid. You know, like someone, you know, it's nice on them. I was gonna put it, you make a bracket and put it, you know, to where it's sticking up, and then locate the belt that way. But this is all kind of open space, so I figured I'm just gonna utilize it. I mean, there's virtually nothing down inside of there, so it looked like a good place for a motor to me. So, but with the addition of pulling that off, and I set screwed onto the taper. I don't really like to do that, but I think it'll work just fine. If need be later on, you know, if I'm happy with it, I'll roll pin it. That way there's no possible slippage issues, but I highly doubt that there will be, even as it is. But the motor, it says it's rated for, I think it's 15 amps, 2 horse. I think it said 6100, but I have tacked it out to be 5600, so plenty of RPM for a mill, but I'd kind of want to keep that open to different varieties. I mean, I know that these don't have, I mean, you can't hardly stop it, you know, with when you put a load on it, but I didn't want to lose the opportunity to be able to lose torque out of it. And I know, you know, if you start to get small pulleys 1-to-1, then you start losing torque. But the one thing that I did notice, I had it set up to where at one time it was at the location of the existing motor, the plate that was back there. So I had it mounted back there, and then now I think about it, I think the pulley up here was probably too big, because when you do your pulley calculator type deal, it's almost like to get the RPM, it wants a big pulley on the drive motor, and then this here needs to be smaller. So that was my limitation, was being able to have a small pulley on this spindle here. But everything that you see seems to be, you know, this size. So the calculators that I'm using seem to be pretty accurate. I mean, but looking at everything, I think what's going to happen is, because what I had is I think it was a 9-inch belt on there, or a 9-inch pulley, excuse me, and then I had a segmented belt, and then what my thought was is I wanted to straddle this column. Well, when I had that big pulley on there, this thing, you'd spin it up, and it was almost like it didn't want to. And now that I think about it, I was getting, I think I had a 9 on here, and the smallest one on here was a 6, and on the tack I was getting I think it was 1300, which, you know, theoretically isn't bad, but that needed to come up. So my thought was, this motor wasn't spinning that pulley well enough. Well, I think after all said and done, I think it was just a matter of this pulley here. But I think with the short belt, I don't know, I didn't like the fact that belt was going to straddle that, and it was going to be a big a belt over there, you know, the whole length of it, and I didn't like that. So the fact that I can keep that motor here, and that belt is going to be super short, so that in itself just seems more efficient to me. So I'm going to go ahead and continue that. I've got a couple different pulleys on the way, and I also have several different things. I think my goal this weekend is going to be able to get the motor mounted to where it successfully slides up and down, and I can locate my belts if I happen to change this. But I want to get it solid, and then because I've got it all hooked up on the potentiometer. But like I said, I've got this here. What I want to do is I've got the amps. But what I noticed is this is only good for 100 volt DC, which really sucks because that MC 90, or I don't remember what it is, that it said I haven't put a multimeter on it to see what the output is on when you crank the pot up, but this here says I think 110 volt. Yeah, 130 volts. So my thoughts are that if I'm full on the pot, that will go to 100, or hopefully it won't damage the meter. But I've been trying to find a display that will be, you know, say 200 volt DC, but so far I haven't. My main concern was I wanted the amperage, that way I could see the spindle load when I'm under material, that I can actually monitor the spindle, you know, the amperage. That way I can see, because it says 15 amps that it pulls, but I would imagine that that's probably under load. But of course I haven't ohm metered anything, so that's kind of where I'm at on this old junker. I want to get all that garbage figured out and done, and then of course, like I've been saying, the ball screws are going to be last. I mean, the ball screws, and then the complete surround to where I'm going to up the pump as well on the wet coolant as far as output. I just don't think it's going to work. I mean, I think it would, but I think after watching a couple videos, I think that I need a little more capacity. If that's provided that the return rate is going to be adequate enough for a bigger pump, so, or if I have a big enough capacity. So we shall see. So that's about it. Thanks.